Now we want to talk about a related topic. It has to do with whether a duty of care can be owed when the victim, the victim of alleged negligence, committed suicide. People commit suicide for all range of reasons, and most of the time there will be no suggestion of a negligence action brought by the suicide victim's family. But sometimes the suicide takes place in circumstances where the family may feel aggrieved and may feel that they were let down by the defendant, by the system. Now, most of the time when an action is brought, it will be concerning a defendant who is a public body or public authority. It could be that the suicide victim was a prisoner, or was at least in police custody in the jail, having just been arrested. Occasionally, the suicide victim might be in a hospital or a psychiatric institution. But anyway, we'll consider only those suicides where the defendant is a public body who has custody of that person. Can a duty of care be owed? Now, I want to emphasize that in these kinds of cases, probably all of the elements of the tort of negligence are at play. It's not just a duty issue in these kinds of cases. But even if there is a duty, then you would still have to examine very closely issues like the standard of care and breach of duty, and even causation, because it looks like a novus actus. And defenses, after all, looks like he's voluntarily taken his own life. Should be, he should know the consequences of trying to commit suicide. So bear that in mind. This is not just a duty issue, but I want you to understand that it is a duty issue as well. Will the duty of care even be owed? If a man commits suicide in the prison cell or in the jail cell, in the family, or even attempts suicide and causes permanent brain damage or something like that, and a family brings an action, the defendant, the police or whatever, would justifiably try to avoid liability, arguing, but they don't owe a duty. I mean, if somebody wants to take his own life, he takes his own life. We don't have a duty to protect people from themselves. This would be, again, offending the rule about nonfeasance. Now, having said that, there will be circumstances where the victim's family would have legitimate expectation that the defendant would take care of that person. And prison is one such example. Particularly so where the prisoner, or the victim of the suicide, is known to the defendant to have suicidal tendencies. So we do see examples where a duty of care is owed. Now, is it misfeasance, is it nonfeasance? I would think that in the successful cases it would be characterized as misfeasance, because in those cases, such as prison or jail, it's true that the defendant, prison authority or police department have full, really complete control over the suicide victim. They can control where he stays, what his movements are, etc., what he eats. There's no liberty available to such a person. And if that person is, for instance, suffering psychiatric illness or depression or whatever, it is brought about by the imprisonment, and the defendant, prison authority should be aware of that and should do what it can, or at least should take reasonable care to ensure that people do not commit suicide. So really, I want you to just be aware of this line of cases. It is a duty issue in addition to other issues. That's the first line of argument in any such case. Is there a duty of care at all? You can look at the cases. We have a Hong Kong case, Yim. We have the leading case in the House of Lords, Reeves. This Reeves case comes up over and over again in our study of negligence law, so you should be familiar with it. In Yim, it seems that I think it was in Stanley Prison, the victim attempted suicide. He failed, so he suffered permanent brain damage. The court approached the case, it seems, it seems to have assumed a duty of care is owed, even though they didn't consider argument about it, or they didn't discuss this issue per se. They discussed breach of duty, which presupposes that there was a duty. So I think that the court was prepared to find a duty there in Yim. And in Reeves, the court had an easier time of it, because there the defendant prison authority, or rather the defendant police department, admitted a duty. And this meant that the court did not have to consider the elements of a duty. But in most cases, you would want to do so and see whether the facts support a duty. One of the features that seems to be required is that the defendant knows or should know of the victim's suicidal tendencies. If the defendant does not know, then it may be harder to prove a duty of care.